Hi everyone, Nicholas Buffett this here from sunny Cyprus, and welcome to today's tutorial. Now, this particular tutorial, this is focused on the Cambridge 0417 IGCSE ICT Theory assessment, the theory component, paper 1. This is probably the most requested video I've been asked to create by students and by quite a lot of educators. It's really hard to create a tutorial for a theory paper because there's just so many variations of the questions and so many different scenarios. It's impossible to know exactly what you're going to be asked to do, especially when you're asked in those questions to compare and contrast, give reasons, name, describe. What do these things mean? Now, this is probably one of the most difficult papers to answer, and it's not because students lack the knowledge. I've been teaching this course for many, many years now, and I know where students go wrong. And again, I will say it's not usually through lack of knowledge. The problem is usually getting the knowledge from their brain onto the paper. The problem is usually students making assumptions that the examiner knows what they're talking about when they put 2 or 3 words on paper. That's not the case. The problem is students not reading carefully the question and understanding exactly what the question is asking you to answer. And then the bigger problem is not identifying these key words that you can see all the way up here in the question so that you know how to answer this question and what it is you're supposed to be writing down. And that's what this tutorial is all about. I'm going to teach you all the tips, the tricks, how to identify exactly what you have to write and how to write it. Now, the resources I'm going to be using for this video tutorial, you can download in a link down at the description. And what you will find there is 3 PDF documents. A PDF document, which is going to be a text document, which explains all the hot tips and how to identify what each of these words mean. We're going to look at that during the tutorial. And then 2 PDF documents of a question paper. I'm going to be answering a complete question paper in this tutorial, but I'm going to be answering it in 2 ways. The correct way and then another one, which is, let's say, the bad one, which is common mistakes that students make when answering these basically short answer or long answer questions. So enough talking about this. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to have a look at is the PDF, which is the tips, which I'm going to give you. Now, I've got the other 2 PDFs open here as well. This is going to be the PDF with the good model answers for this whole paper. This is the June 2022 paper, so it's a very recent paper. And then I'm going to be solving exactly the same paper again with bad answers. Common mistakes that students make. So you can get all 3 of these PDFs in the link below in the description of this video. All right, so let's begin. So first of all, I give you some general advice. This general advice is focused on all 3 papers, essentially. Making sure that you know the main facts, terms, and concepts of your syllabus. Talk to your teacher about the way papers will be marked, and making sure that you understand different key command words. This is a very important one for today's tutorial. We're going to be looking at these and more key words. Look at the most recent papers. Now, this is also a good tip. It's great to answer the older papers as well. It gives you more depth of knowledge, but the more recent papers are going to be more similar to the type of paper that you're going to be answering. And practice tests to build your confidence. Now, when I say practice, I don't mean read the questions and answer them in your head. Actually sit down and write them on paper. It makes such a difference. By actually physically writing the answers to the theory papers, it will give you so much practice and confidence and depth of knowledge, rather than just reading the question and finding the answer and thinking you've understood it or learned it. I say, okay, so general tips for paper 1. Read the questions very carefully. Make sure you understand what you've been asked to do before you start answering the question. I can't stress this enough. If you must read the question twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, as many as you need to make sure it's clear in your head exactly what the question is asking you to do. The important one, identify the key words. These are going to help you know exactly what you have to answer, how to answer, and what the examiner is looking for. And another really important one is look at the marks allocated to that question. That's going to give you a good indicator of how many different points or how much you need to write. And when I say write, I don't mean quantity, I mean quality. And we're going to be seeing this in a second. All right, so let's have a look at the keywords you're looking for. The first one, name. When you're asked to name something, this is usually a one-word answer. For example, name two input devices: mouse, keyboard, microphone. These are one-word answers. You don't need the phrase, you don't need the sentence. When you're asked to give or identify, it's a little bit similar to name, but here you're looking at a slightly more than just one word. You're looking at a short phrase or a sentence. Um, a single word is not going to be enough. And unfortunately, many students, that's what they do. When they see give or identify, they give that one word, they don't get the marks. We're going to have a look at this in a second. So you might be asked to kind of name something. When you so to give and identify, you probably name something and then clarify on it. So that will probably be a 2-mark question. Describe. Now, this is one of the tricky ones. Generally requires a sentence or two to accompany your answer. The aim is to convince the marker. Here's the important thing: to convince the marker of your understanding of the answer you've given and not just knowing the answer. So once you've given an answer, you're probably going to be giving an answer, but then you need to describe why you've given that answer. And that's very important. Give reasons or explain. Now, these are roughly the same thing. Okay, so if you're asked to give reasons or explain something, this is again another tricky one. It means to write down why certain things happen, as opposed to describing what happens. Okay, if you write about a situation, even in great detail, without giving reasons why it happens, you'll get no marks. Here's an example. A common question I give to my students: why is it better to shop online or go to shops directly, physically, and buy things? And they will say, usually it's better online. And I ask them why. They tell me faster. It's faster. So that will get you 0 marks. You're not given that is what happens. That's the result. It's faster. You're not telling me why it's faster. It's faster. You don't have to travel. You can go to many shops from your computer, where you, instead of traveling to all the different places, you've got a much larger geographical area to cover so you can shop. So these are the reasons why it's faster. And that's what we're looking for in a give reasons or an explain question. You have to give the reasons behind your answer. Discuss. Okay. Usually requires you, so this is the discuss one now. This usually requires you to write down both advantages and disadvantages to show both sides of an argument in a given situation. Now, you need to give both sides. If you're comparing advantage and disadvantage of two items, then these must be named when comparing, especially when there are multiple items to compare amongst. And I give you an example. Um, it, if you're asked to describe advantage and disadvantage of different computer types in a particular scenario, well, let's say we're going to compare the battery life of a smartphone compared to other devices, and that's one of our arguments. So we could start off by saying, so where are we? Right, you can't simply say smartphones have a longer battery life. You have to say compared to what? Because you can say they generally got a better battery life than a laptop, but it's not a better battery life than a desktop which is connected to the mains. So you must say compared to what? So, for example, a laptop. Discussion requires you to give both sides of an argument and then to provide your conclusion. So discussions don't normally have a right or wrong answer. They've got a discussion where you go into depth about something and you see both sides of the comparisons that you're making. It must be clear what are considered to be advantages and disadvantages. We don't put bullet points. Do not use bullet points for a discussed question. There are no definitive correct answers, only justified answers based on your defined advantages and disadvantages. And we're going to have a look at quite a few of these in the paper we're going to do. The last one I've got here is probably one of the most tricky ones students find is compare and contrast. What does this mean? Now, here we've got compare and contrast requires you to demonstrate in-depth knowledge of a topic by showing your ability to identify the differences of two or more items. It is not about, and I'm going to highlight, it's not about the advantages and disadvantages as these could be that these can vary in different scenarios. So something could be advantageous in one scenario, it could be a disadvantage in a different scenario. For example, using a laptop computer could be advantageous if you're going to work every day and coming home and you want to have one device, but it's not advantageous if you're traveling abroad and you're going to be in remote locations where there's no power to actually plug your laptop, which is going to die of battery very soon. So a basic concept to follow is when comparing two or more devices is to first identify the similarities of the devices that you're going to be comparing, and then identify the differences of each item in a separate paragraph. Okay, so since we're comparing devices, normally when we're comparing things which are similar kinds of things, they do the similar kind of tasks, but they've got an advantage or disadvantage one over the other in different scenarios. That's what you're looking for. Remember, you're not comparing to a scenario, but instead you are demonstrating an understanding of differences. You, if you have more than two items, then you could compare two items or more at a time. So I'll give you an example here. If you're comparing, let's say, hard disk drives, CD, and USB memory sticks, if you had to compare and contrast this, then one could, I've got an answer here for you. They all store data and they are all secondary storage devices. So here I've identified the similarities of all three. Then I start talking about the memory stick. It's smaller in size than the CD and hard disk drive. Notice I'm identifying which items I'm comparing it to, which makes it portable but easy to lose. So I've got an advantage and a disadvantage here. The hard disk drive can hold more data than a CD and memory stick, but is bulky and will require external cables or hardware to access the data on different devices. So if you've got an external hard disk drive, you might have to have it inside a caddy. You might need some cabling, so on and so to connect it so you can read that data. The CD has got fixed capacity, unlike the memory stick and the hard disk drive. So the CD, you can't get different size CDs, let's say, unless you're going for dual layer and so on and so forth, but is flat and light, making it easy to carry. A CD is much cheaper than a memory stick or hard disk drive. So why am I saying this? Because it makes it ideal for giving to others without needing them to return the storage device. So if I want to give some material to my students, I'm not going to go and buy a hard disk drive to each student and give them the hard disk drive. I could just write things onto a CD, which is cheap, and give it to them, and I won't want them to give that back to me. Okay. And then I finish off with CDs are also harder to erase or change data, especially in the case of CD-ROM. So it is harder to accidentally erase data, unlike the hard disk drive and memory stick. Notice here, I'm again stating what I'm comparing this property to. The property of the CD-ROM that you can't delete data, I'm comparing that property to the hard disk drive and memory stick. So this is how I'm comparing and contrasting. I'm not comparing to a scenario, and I don't have to give my opinion or my conclusion as to which one is better for a particular scenario. I'm just comparing devices and showing in-depth knowledge of all these devices by comparing them and contrasting on these comparisons. Okay, I'll finish off this document with a conclusion. Things like timing yourself, allocating your time, and looking at the questions. Don't spend too much time on the question, especially if it's only 2 marks. Move on, get back to it. Allow yourself some time to go back and check the answers. Make sure you answer or attempt all the questions. It's very important that you answer the exact question asked. So read the question carefully and avoid, I can't stress this, irrelevant information just because you have learned it. Don't just throw random facts in the question because you know something extra than what they're asking for. It probably has nothing to do with the answer, only if it's related and it's relevant to that question. Avoid giving a list of points, especially when you're doing discussions or compare and contrast. Follow the instructions provided carefully. If you're asked to give 2 reasons for something, then giving 4 will not gain you any more marks. Now, I know this from experience as an examiner. The marker or the examiner will only take the first 2 that you've given and ignore the rest. So if you the first 2 items, let's say you had to give 2 reasons for something and you give 4, and the first 2 are wrong, but the second 2 are correct, then the examiner will only look at the first two, and if they're wrong, you get 0 marks. You're not going to bother looking at the other two because you might turn around and write 50 different answers, and the examiner is not going to try and find from those 50 two that are correct. They're going to take the first two, scrap the rest. So there's no point writing more. I'm going to give you one more tip. When writing these long answer questions, have some extra paper, write your question out on a spare piece of paper if you've got time, and then write your complete answer on the exam paper. Usually when we're trying to put an answer together, we kind of think of things as we're writing, and then we try to make them fit in, and they don't make sense because it doesn't follow a correct structure. So if you can write your points down on a spare piece of paper and then model your answer on the question paper, that's just going to give you a much better answer and an easier to read answer for the examiner. So let's begin answering our first paper. Okay, so here's the paper we're going to be working on. I'm going to answer the complete paper. This is the May-June 2022 theory paper 1-1. So let's scroll down and go to the first question. And we can see this first question is a circle question. So we're going to be answering this whole paper, so we can see all the different types of questions that we can get in the theory paper. And here it basically says circle two network devices. So my advice to you is this. Let's say you have identified these two items here to be the network device, and then you realize monitor is wrong. You can't just go and circle the other one as well. This will get you 0 marks because the examiner is not going to tell you which of the two are correct and which are not. However, if you want to scrap one of your answers, make it very clear the one that you don't want. Okay, it has to be very clear. And this way, the examiner is going to say, okay, this is the one that they're looking at, and this is the one that they're looking at. This one has been crossed out. The other thing I find students doing is something like this. So they have the 3 there, and then they'll just cross it out just a little bit like that, and expect the examiner to say, well, hang on, if this was the correct one and this one here is the wrong one, they're going to give them the mark because they thought of it. They won't. Okay, so make sure you're very clear about which 2 items you're going to select. Okay, question number 2 is compare each sentence using the most appropriate item from the list. Your answers must be different in each case. Now, what we're looking at here is the word must be different. Okay, now remember, we want to be identifying the words. So we can't use the same one 2 times. This is great because it makes it easier to use the process of elimination. The physical components of a computer are called, well, here we go, hardware. Programs and data are examples of software. Now, here, this one might be a bit of a confusing one for some people if you haven't studied properly. A small application performing 1 or 2 simple functions is called. Now, if we look at this thing here, something small. So we want to be looking up here. Now, if I'm not too sure, I'm going to go to the next one first so I can eliminate more items. An input device used in measurement applications is called, well, the ADC is an analog to digital converter, so it's not that. The router, so I'm just going to cross out the ones which I'm going to eliminate. So that ADC I'm eliminating. A router is a network device. The hardware I've used, the software I've used, hard disk drive and SSD are both storage devices. So it's one of these two. And I've only got 2 questions I'm not sure about. So it's going to be the applet, just by common sense, is going to be the one which is a small program, and the sensor is going to be my measuring device. Okay. Identify 2 devices. Now here we've got the word identify. Okay. So if we look at when we're doing identify, 2 devices which are used in control systems. Now I've put the abbreviation, the ADC, analog to digital converter, and DAC, digital to analog converter. Now in this case, I could just put ADC and DAC, but to show 100% that I know what I'm talking about, this is like 2-mark question. So it's going to be 1 mark for each one. So I don't need too much detail, but I've also explained what that acronym stands for. That just shows clearly I know what I'm talking about. Okay, and let's now begin with some of these short answer questions. So let's begin with this one. So let's read the question. Many laptop computers use the cloud to store data. A technician has produced a report on his laptop computer, but has stored the report on a memory stick. I'm just going to highlight that rather than storing it on the cloud. Okay. Now, I'm going to be using two colors for highlighting this paper. The first one is going to be a yellow highlight. That's going to identify the keyword that we have seen already in this document. So where we've identified these keywords, compare and contrast, discuss, so on and so forth, that's going to be the yellow highlight. The green one is what it is that I need to focus on. And I think the green one is the most important one. This is where students go wrong. So it says describe. Now we said describe has to have a little bit more depth. It can't be one word. It's only 2 marks for this question, which means I'm getting 1 mark for each one. So I don't need too much detail. I just want to show good understanding and knowledge. Two advantages. So I want to write down two advantages. That's my aim of using a memory stick rather than the cloud to store data. So my first one is does not need internet access to store or access the data on the memory stick. So it's not one word. I've given the reason. It doesn't need internet, but doesn't need internet for what? And then storing data on the device is easier and safer as it is not reliant on the stability of the internet connection. So if you don't have internet or your internet is intermittent, you can the memory stick is going to be a better choice. Let's have a look at some bad answers now. So the first ones, we can't really have bad answers for that, so I haven't filled that in. But if we look at this question that we're looking at here, there we go. So this is a classic answer from students, one that students would give. It's easier to store than on cloud. What does that mean? We're not saying why. We need to show a little bit more depth of knowledge. It's easier to store. Why is it easier? We haven't given that reason. And the next one is it is safer or it is faster. Again, why is it faster? You need to show a little bit more in-depth knowledge. And if we look at our guide, we can see this guide generally requires a sentence or two to accompany your answers. The aim is to convince the marker of your understanding of the answer you've given, not just knowing the answer. So here we've got describe, and because it's described, I need to show the examiner I know why I've given the answer. So it says many bank cards now use contactless technology. This is the question. Okay. Describe the advantages and disadvantages of using these cards. So these cards are now contactless cards rather than using cards which have a chip and pin. 4 marks. I need to hit 4 items, 4 things, and I need to explain or prove I understand what these things are. So I've got here contactless cards are easier to use as the owner does not need to enter a PIN for the transaction to proceed, thus saving time, but also means that it is safer as it prevents shoulder surfing. Shoulder surfing is when people stand over your shoulder and they see you punching in your PIN. As it is contactless, the owner does not have to remove the card from their wallet, making payment easier when carrying other items, but also causes less wear on the card. So can you see, I'm saying here it's probably faster, it's easier, but I'm also explaining what that means. Why is it easier? So if they're carrying a lot of things, they don't have to worry about opening the wallet, getting the card out, putting in and punching in the PIN number. I'm showing I know what that answer is. The answer I'm giving you some clarification on it. The fact that the card is contactless and does not require a PIN means that money can be withdrawn from the card by a hacker using a reader without the knowledge of the owner. So here's my disadvantage. This is very clear. I don't need to write the question again, and I don't have to write this as a disadvantage. It's very clear. It also means that if the card is stolen or lost, it can still be used by anyone with limited spending without them needing to know the PIN. So here I've shown a very clear understanding. I think anyone who doesn't know about contactless cards yet has probably learned a lot just from my answer here. I've given at least 4 points, more points than 4, but everything is there. It's a complete answer. Let's look at the bad answer. So here it says, the advantage and disadvantage of using contactless technology is that this is just repeating that question. There's no point repeating the question again and again and again. Okay, easier to pay. What does that mean? This is a describe. I need to describe this. Okay, I need to describe these answers. Saying easier to pay is not going to help. An advantage is that the owner does not need to enter the PIN. Why is this an advantage? Why is not entering the PIN not an advantage? I haven't given this discussion. I haven't explained this. This means that when somebody goes to pay, they can simply place the card near the reader and it will pay for the items. Again, I'm saying that they don't need to PIN. They don't need to enter the PIN. I'm simply repeating myself in this sentence here is exactly the same with what I've just written here. Disadvantage is that it is not as safe as a chip and pin, and it is easier. Well, it should be for it to be hacked, not for it to be hacked. Easier for it to be hacked. So let me just change that now. Easier for it to be hacked. Now, how? I'm given an answer, but I haven't described it, I haven't explained it. And there's where the issue is. So just saying it's easier or it's easier to be hacked, it's faster is not going to cut it. Okay, so that's something that you normally see from quite a lot of students. All right, let's go to the next one. Starship. Now, I chose this particular paper, one, because it's a recent paper, two, it's got a lot of different scenarios here, and I think it's a really good paper to test your knowledge on. Star sheets are used in web pages. Okay, so my scenario here is it's star sheets and web pages. So if you know what star sheets are, then you'll understand what it's talking about. It says explain. Now remember, explain, what does that mean? So if we go down here, describe, explain, give reasons, explain. So if you write about a situation, even in great detail, without giving the reasons why it happens, it will gain no marks. So we need to explain the why. So here's my answer, the model answer. Style sheets are used to separate the presentation layer of the HTML document from its content. So the presentation layer is the layer which deals with how the web page looks like, what it looks like, for example, the back, the colors, the font styles, the styles of the headings, the styles of the table, the borders, what it's going to look like, and the content is the actual data. So the style sheets deal with that part. It separates the two. We don't have everything inside the HTML document. Style sheets describe how the presentation of the different objects in the HTML document will look like. Now, I'm explaining what? I'm explaining the term. Very important. You see, in green, I've highlighted the term. I want to explain what the term style sheets means. I don't want to explain what the style sheet is. I want to explain the term style sheet. So a bad answer here is style sheets are used so that you do not have to format every HTML file so that they look the same. It saves time as you can change the style sheet and all the HTML pages will change automatically. That's a perfectly good answer for a different question. I'm not explaining the term. So this is more like a describe instead of explain, because here I'm describing what style sheets are rather than explaining what the term style sheets means. Okay, so again, be very careful with reading that question. Let's go to part B. So part B is going to be relative to whatever is in the description up here of the question of 6. So again, we're looking at style sheets used in web pages. Now, this is a 4-mark question. Again, it's an explain. And here I want to explain differences. So very important, the green thing. What am I explaining? I want to explain the differences. Okay, and the differences of what? Between attached style sheets and inline style attributes. So I want to explain the differences between inline attributes and style sheets. So let's look at my answer. Attached style sheets are separate files which are linked to one or more HTML documents by adding a link in the header section of the HTML documents that will use the style sheet. So essentially, they're a separate file. They are linked to the HTML document with a link or some code in the header section. That's probably 2 marks. Just this one sentence here is probably 2 marks. Okay. This allows the presentation of many web pages to be changed automatically by editing the style sheet file or files they are linked to. So here I'm also saying you can have more than one style sheet linked to that HTML document. Inline styles are styles which are written within the HTML code of the web page and will only change the presentation of the content of that web page. So here I'm explaining that inline styles are basically the same kind of code, but they're embedded in the HTML document. So they will only affect that HTML document. Why do they exist? Well, changing the presentation of many web pages means editing the inline styles of each web page individually. That's a disadvantage. However, inline styles can be used to override styles inherited from a linked style sheet. So if you've got a HTML web page which is linked to a style sheet and it says heading 1 should be green, but inside the HTML code you put an inline attribute, a style attribute saying heading 1 should be red, then it will be red because it will override. I'm showing in-depth knowledge here. I'm showing that I understand what these two terms are. A bad example would be here. Style sheets can be used to change the look of look. Okay, I've got some errors here. Look of many web pages at the same time. This means that if we want to change the font of the heading 1 for all the pages, we can do this from the style sheet and all the headings will change. It is much faster to do this with style sheets because using the inline styles will mean that we have to change the heading 1. Will mean that we will need to edit every page separately, which will take a lot of time. So basically, I'm not going to get 4 marks. I might get 1 there, but I'm basically repeating again and again and again and again the same thing. But the focus is on advantages and disadvantages instead of the differences. And can you see here, I highlighted that when I was looking at this, I want to explain the differences. Oh, cancel that. I want to explain the differences, not the advantages and disadvantages. So again, the student has not paid attention to the question and answered based on what the question is asking. Okay, so again, explain the differences between them. We're not looking at advantages and disadvantages. We're not saying which one's better, which one's worse. We're just saying what the differences are. Next question, number 7. 2 types of database are relational and flat file. So here I'm going to be looking at databases. Now, again, the theory paper does bring in some of the practical, but you don't have to do any practical. You just have to show understanding of some of the concepts that we use in the practical components of this course. And one of those components is databases. Usually the questions will be something on databases or spreadsheets. So it says compare and contrast. If we go have a look here, we looked at what compare and contrast meant, okay? And this is where we have to compare 2 or more devices and state the advantages and disadvantages of each one. We said one of the first things that we do is to compare the similarities. So I've got here, both relational flat file databases store data, that should be data, in tabular form using fields and records. So there's my similarity. So I've already explained a similarity here, which is that they both store data in tabular form and they use fields and records. Okay, so that's already my similarity there. Then, and both databases use primary key fields to make sure each record is unique. So there's another similarity, whether it's relational, whether it's flat, I've got some similarities between the two. So now that I've compared them, I've already found some similarities. Both databases or both database types can be queried to return information and reports can be generated. So whether it's relational or flat, we can query both of them, we can search them, we can produce reports, and we can generate reports from this data. Flat file databases only have one table and has a simple structure. Okay, so I've just now moved away from the similarities and I'm now identifying the individual features. Relational databases, however, have multiple tables which are linked using relationships and utilize primary and foreign keys. So now I'm comparing that to the flat file. It has more than one table. These tables are linked together with things called relationships, and they use primary and foreign key. Now, if you don't know what that is, essentially a table has a primary key, and if we link that primary key field with another field which has the same kind of data, let's say an ID number, and in that table, it's known as a foreign key because in the previous table it's linked to, it's a primary. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, make sure you watch my tutorials on databases. Using multiple linked tables instead of one flat file table reduces data duplication, which allows for easier data entry, but also allows data to be cross-referenced across multiple tables. If we're going to be writing test records of students doing tests, and we've only got a flat file, we've got the student name and then their score and some other information. Every time they do another test, we have to again write the student name, the other information, the test score, the student name, and we keep duplicating that data, making it much more cumbersome, a bigger database, and probably be a bit slower database. By using linked tables, we avoid that because we have the names in one table and we link them to a table with scores. So we only add the score each time. Now, can you see I haven't used all these lines? It's an 8-mark question, but I've identified 8 different things. Okay, so you don't have to yap and yap and yap and just keep writing and writing the same thing again and again and again and again and again to prove that you understand that one point. Let's go look at the MAD version of this question. So here we've got relational databases have more than one table. Flat files have only one table and all the data is stored in there. With a relational database, the data is stored in different tables, which means that not all the data is in the same table as in flat file. For example, if we had a database about a class and their test results, if all the data was entered in one table, that would be a flat file. I've just spent 6 lines, 5 lines, writing the same thing 3 different ways or 4 different ways. If there's a mark there, it's 1 mark. It's not 2, it's not 3. I'm just talking about the same thing again and again. If we save the student information in one table and the test scores in a different table, then that will be a relational database. Again, I'm talking about the same thing. The fact that relational databases have more than one table, flat files have one. Both types have a primary key, but as the relational database has more than one table, then it will have a primary key for every table. So maybe another point there, but not very good for an 8-mark question. In red, I write repetitive. They are saying the same thing in different ways, so it will not get any extra marks, 2 marks possibly. Let's go to the next question. So here we've got a give question, and we're still on the same question, number 7, 2 types. So we're talking about relational database and flat files. And here we want to give, so that's the scope of our answer. And the green is what we're going to be giving on. So we want to give examples. So here we're looking for examples. One reason why flat file databases are used in certain applications rather than relational databases. So I want to give a reason and an example, 1 mark for each. I think this is an easy one, it's self-explanatory. So one of the possible reasons is it's a small database. If it's a small database, there's no point creating 6 tables to hold 3, 4, 5 records. You might as well just duplicate the data if need be 6 times. And the example, an address book or any database which is essentially a list, company address list, inventory list, somewhere along those lines. Anything which is just the form of a list, then we can just put in one table. There's no point. We can just leave it as a flat file. And if there's not that many records, I don't know, they've got 2, 3, 400 records, it's really not much big of a deal. No point going into the hassle of just do it or splitting everything up in tables. Let's say it's a list of companies that you work with, your company works with and collaborates with other companies. Well, each company is going to have its own name, its own contact details, so on and so forth. So there's no point having multiple tables. But if for each company you're providing services and you want to track the services over, so you've got the history over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and you do services for each company, say 20, 30, 50, 60 times a year, then there's no point repeating that again and again and again and again and again. We can have one table, which is the company details and the company ID number, and then a separate table, which is the services which we've offered to companies, and we link that to the company ID. But if that's not the case, a flat file would do, just a list. I don't have a bad answer for that because you either get that one right or you don't. All right, when using computers, people can suffer from repetitive strain injury, RSI. Now, notice here they've given you what RSI means. So there's no point you saying RSI means repetitive strain injury because they just told you that. What are we looking for? We're looking for a describe. Okay, so again, just focusing back here, describe, there it is. We want to convince the marker of your understanding of the answer you've given and not just knowing the answer. So describe the term RSI. Now, what are we looking for? We want to prove we know what the term RSI means. We don't want to say how we get RSI. We don't want all of this. We want to describe the term. Okay, and this is why I think it's really important. The green highlighting is probably more important than identifying that keyword because this is where students go wrong. Including your answer the causes of RSI. Okay, so we can put the causes in. So when using computers, RSI normally affects the hands, fingers, or wrist and results in pain and or swelling of these areas. So we already know what repetitive strain injury is. And we're saying, what does the term mean? It basically means that we have pain or swelling due to repetitive actions when using a computer. Now, remember, all of this is with reference to using computers, nothing else. RSI is caused by repetitive movements like clicking of the mouse, moving the mouse, or from the constant finger movement of typing. So here I've discussed the causes of RSI with reference to computers, the use of computers, nothing else. 3 marks. So I've given some examples, I've explained the term, I should be okay. Here's a bad answer. RSI is repetitive strain injury, which is caused from doing the same thing again and again. Well, as I said, they've given this already. There's no point giving them the answer they've given us. You can get RSI from using a computer or from doing any task that is repetitive. Too vague. Using a computer, how? Like writing or playing games on a gaming console with a joystick. This here is not related to the use of computers. So you're not going to get any marks. Remember, we're looking at RSI, describing the term RSI and including the causes of RSI when it comes to using computers. So these little descriptions at the top of each question, make sure you read them. Okay? The answer should be focused on the use of computers. That's the problem with that one. Let's go to identify 3 methods of reducing the effects of RSI. So 3 methods, 3 marks. Here we are going to identify. Have we put identify in here? I think I have. There we go. Give and identify. Here you need to give a short phrase or sentence as an answer. A single word statement for an answer is not acceptable. Now, this is a bit tricky. So here I just want to write a short phrase or a sentence. So 3 methods of reducing. Take regular breaks. So that will probably be okay because that's a short phrase. But I've gone a little bit further to say so that repetitive movements are not prolonged for long periods of time. So if you're taking regular breaks and you're clicking your mouse or typing for a long time, this constant movement of your fingers typing is not for a prolonged time. So you're taking that break. Use a wrist rest when using a keyboard. So you can't just write wrist rest. That will be like a name. It's not asking us to name, we're asking us to identify. So when using the keyboard, short phrase. Use an ergonomic keyboard or a mouse. Again, we're not just saying ergonomic, we're giving a short phrase, we're identifying something. So over here, I haven't given a bad answer for this one, but a bad answer would say, I don't know, say breaks, wrist rest, ergonomic. You can't use one word answers. Okay, Martin, who is a teacher, is creating a multimedia presentation to explain a topic to his students. So First of all, let's see what Martin, who's a teacher, is creating a multimedia presentation to explain the topic to his students. He produces a master slide. All right. Write down 4 objects he could include in the master slide. Well, basically anything that you can add in any slide. The master slide is just a template, let's say, and will be so that you don't have to put these items again and again if they're repetitive items on a slide. So we could put pictures, we could put slide numbers, navigation buttons to jump to different slides in the presentation. For example, go to the end or go to a certain section. And it could also be a video. You might have like a little short video at the top, a logo or something of the company, anything like that. You can add anything you want in the master slide. Again, no bad answer there. You either know that one or you don't. Right, so we continue with this presentation, multimedia presentation. Martin wants to record a message for his students. His voice will be added to the presentation. His voice will be added to the presentation. That's important. And he's going to record a message. Okay. He will also need to listen to his voice to make sure the sound is of good quality. Okay, so he needs to listen to make sure it sounds of good quality. Okay, so name again. Here we're saying name. We just want one word answers for name. 2 devices that he will need. Microphone, speaker. You don't need to say a microphone so that he can record his voice, and you don't need to say speaker so that he can hear his voice. It's just a name. What single words? Martin will need to use software to create different types of content before including them in the presentation. So he's going to be using different types of software. And all right, name again, name 2 types of software. So we just want one word, one name of software that he might use, and for each one, write down what he would use it for. This is like deconstructing a describe question. With a describe question, we'll name something and then we'll explain why we've given that answer to show depth of knowledge. Well, here they've broken down the describe question into 2 pieces. First, you name it with a single word, and then you give the explanation. So I put down the software one is an image editor because he's going to be adding, it's a multimedia presentation. So multimedia means text, images, movement like video or animations. To modify images and make them appropriate for the presentation, he could crop the images, modify colors, change the dimensions, or reduce the image size. Now I've given this because it says for each one, write down what he would use it for. So modifying the images, how? Okay, remember, always question your answer. So I've said modify the image and then I've said how. Audio editor to record. So he's going to use an audio editor, let's say, to record and then modify the audio message. For example, he could reduce the noise, crop the audio, things like this. So again, I've given my answer and I've also explained how he's going to use this audio editor, not just the fact that it's going to edit audio. How is he going to use it? 4 marks. Number 10. Let's read the first part. The river authority is concerned about levels of pollution in a major river. The quality of the river in the river needs to be monitored using sensors. Okay, so this is a river and we want to check or measure different things related to pollution in this river. So name. So here we're naming. Again, we just want single names, 3 sensors that could be used to measure the pollution in the river. So I've put down an oxygen sensor, light sensor, and a pH sensor. Okay, oxygen sensor to see the oxygen levels in the water, a light sensor to see if the water is clear or if it's murky. The murkier it is, the light sensor will obviously change. Think about trying to shine a light through clear water and shining it through murky water. The murkier it is, the less light gets to the sensor. A pH sensor to measure the acidity of the water. Again, no bad answers here. You either know your sensors or you don't. Now, here we go. This is a 6-mark question. I've probably gone a little bit more than 6 marks here, but doesn't matter. So it says here, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using computers to measure the pollution in the river rather than humans measuring the pollution. I'm going to read the bad answer first this time. Let's go the other way around. So this is the bad answer, let's say. It looks like I've written quite a bit here, but is it any good? It is cheaper to use computers instead of humans. Why? I haven't said. Computers can measure pollution 24/7 without a break. Humans make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Humans may read measurements differently every time if the measurement is not displayed on a screen. Okay, well, there's a mistake. This means that there is a level of inaccuracy when humans are reading measurements. Also, as it will not be only one person reading the measurements, as it is not possible for one person to be there all the time, it increases the inaccuracy as different people will measure things differently to others. It is also important to know that humans may write down or record the readings wrong, which is something a computer will not do. I haven't really gone into identifying things and discussing things. I've been very repetitive here. I'm writing the same thing again and again about humans making mistakes and computers not making mistakes. There are a couple of marks here, but this is not a 6-mark answer. Let's go have a look at a good one. So computers are able to record measurements continuously without any breaks 24/7. Computers are able to record more readings per given time than a human. So here's one thing that I'm discussing here. They can take more measurements. So if a human could take, let's say, 3 measurements a minute, a computer would probably take 3,000. These readings can be recorded and displayed in data charts automatically in real time, something that cannot be done by humans. Again, a very good point here. That data, if it's linked up with a database or some other software in an office, the measurements will come in real time and you can actually see live the pollution levels rising up and down, and you can take action immediately. It may be that readings need to be taken in dangerous or remote locations, which would either not be possible or be difficult for humans, but not an issue for computers. We'll think of when you let's say you've got this river in a very difficult to reach location. It's going to be hard for humans going up and down and reaching that locations and taking measurements and going there every day, whereas not an issue for computers. You just set it up there and you're fine. If constant measurements need to be taken, then it will be more costly with humans, as more humans will be required, and this would be costly. So if you want someone there 24/7, then you're going to have more people working around the clock, and that's going to cost more money. So here we've actually explained why it's more expensive. Humans also are susceptible to human error when reading measurements, whereas computers are constant. So humans can make errors. Computers are constant with their measurements. Sensors, however, can be susceptible to extreme temperature changes, which could affect readings. Now, extreme temperatures and extreme weather conditions can influence the readings from sensors. So, a high increase in temperature will increase resistivity, which could change the way things are read. High winds, if the water is moving around too fast because of high winds and the currents have increased, it could change the way that the light sensor reads. So we've actually identified that as well. Also, computers will record any data it is given by the sensors and will not be able to identify unusual circumstances, which a human could. So again, if somebody sees something while they're taking measurements, they can actually take actions, or they can change the way they do the readings, or not take that reading, not include it because, let's say, somebody stepped in the lake and I don't know, caused an issue with the readings. Whereas a computer won't be able to identify that. They will record everything and the anomalies will be seen. Equipment is expensive and placing it in open areas could leave it vulnerable to theft or vandalism. So if this is a lake, this is an outside open area, leaving equipment there could lead to that equipment being damaged. So this is a model answer. There's more than 6 points. Well done there. There's more than 6 points which I've covered on here. Okay. You don't need to put all of them, but I think you've got a good understanding of how I give an answer, and then I clarify and show how I actually know why I'm giving that answer. And that's the whole point about discuss. 11. A system can be analyzed using different methods. Discuss. What am I discussing? Advantages and disadvantages. So again, this green thing here, what we're going to be discussing is going to be advantages and disadvantages. We need to focus on that. Let's not stray away from it. of analyzing a system by interviewing staff rather than using questionnaires. So this is from the system lifecycle. It's all about collecting information, and we're going to be interviewing staff to get information about a current system, or we're going to be using questionnaires. So let's discuss. So interviews are more personal than questionnaires and allow the person doing the interview to expand and elaborate on questions if they want to. Okay, that's obvious because it's one-to-one. They might say something that might trigger to say, well, hang on, let's elaborate on this. You can't do that with a questionnaire. The person being interviewed is able to ask for clarification if they don't understand or are unsure of the question. Again, with a questionnaire, they have the questions, they've got no one to refer to if they need help or clarification. Interview questions can be modified for the individual and their role. So, um, if you're using a questionnaire, you're giving this to everybody. The questionnaire is fixed, the questions are fixed. They're not created for specific roles, whereas an interview, you can actually ask questions based on each person's role and position in the company. This is important to get detailed insights when analyzing a system. Okay. Because questioning in an interview is not fixed and can vary, it is hard to represent the information collected from the interview in an analytical form like a chart. Now, again, this is important. It's important because when we are actually doing interviews, the style of questioning is different, it's more personalized. So we can't collate all that information and put it, let's say, in a statistical package or a spreadsheet to create charts and get percentages and get charts and this, that, there, which are visual information. This will be possible with a questionnaire. So with a questionnaire, because all the questions are fixed and everyone's going to answer the same question, it is actually possible. In an interview, people may not be as honest as a questionnaire because they are not anonymous and may fear that what they say may be used against them. Another disadvantage of interviews is that it is difficult to interview a large number of staff and even harder to interview staff that may work at different locations or if they are generally moving around like delivery drivers. So here, if somebody's asking you, what do you think the problems are in the company? Why do you think there's delays and this, that, the other? If it's an interview, you're probably not going to answer as honestly because you might feel that if you answer against the company, you might get fired or some other repercussions might occur. Whereas with a form or a questionnaire, it's anonymous. So you probably, staff probably be a bit too honest or maybe even make things seem worse than they are. So both have their advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at the bad. So that's this one here. So here I've shown, you can see this is like point form. Interviews are better than questionnaires because you have the answers immediately. Again, this means nothing. You have the answers immediately. Well, not necessarily. People prefer to talk to someone instead of filling in a form. Why? Again, the first one. Why? Forms are impersonal and nobody will bother filling them in. Why not? What does it mean they're impersonal? Why would they not fill them in? You need to elaborate. You need to say, explain to the examiner or the marker why you've given this answer. This is the whole point of the discuss. With interviews, people don't say the truth. Why? Again, we've given the answer, we haven't said why. It is more expensive to do interviews, so this is a disadvantage. You know what I'm going to say. Why? Why is it more expensive? See, and this is the whole point with discussion. We need to prove to the marker that we know why we've given that answer. With a questionnaire, someone has to collect all the data, but with interviews, the data is collected straight away from the interviewer. Why is that an advantage or a disadvantage? Okay, so there are some good points here, but they're not justified, leaving them down to interpretation. This does not demonstrate knowledge. Okay, so we need, especially with discuss, we need to say why we're giving that answer. Okay, getting close to the end now. Many company computer network systems use Wi-Fi as a communication system to help prevent the issue of tripping over trailing cables. And that's when you've got cables like running across corridors and this, that, the other. Okay, so for each of the following physical safety issues, describe, so why, two ways of helping to prevent them. So here's the first one, fire. So they've given us the name. So instead of asking us name a physical safety issue and then give reasons why. They've said describe, but they've given us the name part. So we're only getting 2 marks, one for each one. So for 5, put make sure not to overload power sockets, as this could result in an electrical fire. Can you see here? Make sure not to overload power sockets. That's not good enough. Why? I've given the reason why. This could result in an electrical fire. 2, make sure that cooling fans are operational and air vents are clean and have good airflow to prevent overheating. I've given the reason why. Airflow, fans should be working, airflow should be good. Why? Because if they're not, they could overheat and result in a fire. Electrocution. Do not have drinks or other liquids near electrical equipment, as a spillage could cause electrocution. So the word here is spillage. If somebody spills something, you can get electrocuted, especially if you're near high power voltages where you plug your devices in. Make sure that there are no bare wires visible, as touching these could result in electrocution. These should be replaced or wrapped with insulation tape. So here again, I've given the reason and I've said why. And see, this is the whole thing with describing. This is why you see so many describe questions. There are not so many compare and contrast questions, but there's a lot of describe, because the describe, that second part, is where you show your knowledge as to why you've given that answer. So a common use of home computers is online gaming. All right. Describe. Here we go again. We have to say why. 3, safety measures. Now, notice again, I said at the beginning of this tutorial, I'm going to say it again, I'm going to keep saying it. The green highlight is probably the most important, because this is what your answer has to focus on. Safety measures, which should be taken when playing games on the internet. I'm going to go to the bad one here first. Make sure the computer is placed in a well-ventilated area so that it does not overheat from many hours of gameplay. Take regular breaks so that you do not get eye strain or other health issues from prolonged computer use. Make sure that the sockets are not overloaded so as to minimize the risk of an electrical fire. I've also added another one because I thought, I've got another one here. This one, I just want to show the examiner that I really know my stuff here. So I've got another point here. Check this out. Make sure to be respectful to other players. Let's analyze this question and see why it's wrong. Well, it says here the first 3 points are not correct, are correct, but not for safety as requested. See this? This is to do with safety, not to do with safety. That little letter E is the key component here. This is why these green highlights, which I've given you, are so important for you to find and identify. It's about safety, not physical safety. So making sure for a fire, electrocution, and that's got nothing to do with safety. That's to do with safety in general, physical safety. The only one here which is relevant is this 4th one, but it will get 0 marks. As I explained in this document here, I'll go down in my notes, the marker will generally take the first 2 reasons. So if you ask for 2 reasons, they will only take the first 2 reasons and ignore the rest. So if you are asked here to give 3 reasons, here are my 3 reasons. 1, 2, 3. This one is ignored. And that's the only one that's correct. Okay, so that will not get a mark because it wasn't part of the 3 reasons. Let's go have a look at a good answer. Never give any personal information, and if you must give a name, give a fake name. So if you have to give a username or something like that, give a fake name or a nickname. If somebody is being mean or disrespectful, you should report them. So in most applications, most gaming, online gaming, there is a place where you can go and actually report someone if they're being disrespectful, if they're being bullies, or anything like that, if they're using foul language. And the last one, be respectful to other players. Do not taunt or tease others. So being respectful is, a common rule in general. Now, there are other answers, and let me say these are my model answers, but if you look at the mark sheet, they will accept other things as well. I'm just giving the ones which I think are the ones that students will be able to relate to the most and are correct. In order to log on to online gaming, a user ID and password is needed. explain. So here we've got an explanation. What is meant by? What do we mean by? So that green area again, very important. A user ID and password. It's not asking you to say how you're going to use it. It's saying what is meant by user ID and user password. So here's my answer. The username and password are used to authenticate the person logging into the online game. So that's its purpose. So somebody can actually sign into the game. The username is usually something that identifies the user, such as a nickname or an email address, and is unique from other users so that they can be individually identified. And then the password is a set of characters which is created by the owner, is used when the username with the username as a security measure to make sure the person signing in with the username is the owner of the username. And this is really important. So the password is something that the user will generate. It's unique. It doesn't relate to them. And it's only there to make sure that whoever's using that username to sign in or that email address is actually the owner of it, because only the owner knows that password. And it's a string of characters. Here's a bad one. The user ID is the person's nickname or email address, and the password is what the user signs in with. Okay, the password must be a secure password and must be at least 8 characters long and use capital and small letters, numbers, and special characters. Well, again, here, the answer at the beginning is very vague, doesn't really explain what the terms or what is meant by user ID and password. And the second part of it is not relevant to the question. We're not asking what a secure password is. um, we want just to explain what ID and password is, not what a secure password is or how you would generate a secure password. So again, probably get 1 mark for that. Okay, let's go down to number 13. Here we've got another explain. Now, if we go down to explain, just to keep referring to this, so we've got, here you go, give reasons and explain. This is why certain things happen. Okay, not describing what happens, but why something happens. So explain the need for copyright legislation when data is published on the internet. This is a question I think a lot of students have problems with, and it's also an issue in general because copyright is a big problem with the vast availability of content on the internet. Nobody's actually paying attention to copyright laws, and people are leaving themselves exposed and vulnerable to having a lawsuit against them or just getting in trouble in general, and it's happened many times. Okay, so let's have a look at this answer. Copyright is a legal right of ownership of content created by someone. So anything that somebody's created, it is something which protects them and says this content belongs to this person. It protects the owner of the content so that it cannot be copied or used in any way without their permission. The content can be anything from a document someone wrote, a video they created, a song they composed and wrote the lyrics to, software they generated, or anything else. So, absolutely anything that they have created. Now, remember, this question is related to data which is published on the internet. Okay, so this is for electronic um, data. The creator slash owner of the content has the right to share or sell a copyright to whomever they want. If you are going to use any content from the internet, it is important that you read the terms and conditions and make sure that you are not breaking any laws. It is your responsibility to make sure that you are using content from the internet legally. So here I've given you slightly more than 4 points, but you understand what we're talking. This is the need for copyright. The need is so that the person or company who has created some content is protected and that the material that created belongs to them. The need is so that people can't just go and take that content and use it and make money from it, essentially, by using content that somebody else has generated. That's the need. Okay, this is why we need copyright legislation. Okay, so all of this is about the need. So, and it's there. And because of this, people have to make sure that they read the license agreements, they read the legal requirements of using any material they download. Let's look at a bad answer. All right, very short. It says here, copyright legislation is needed to make sure that others don't steal your work or creations. Too vague. Okay. And too vague for a 4-mark answer. You need to identify 4 needs. There you go. I need that to be read, so you know that's my comment on that answer. So this is a vague answer, not going to get any marks. So that others don't steal your work creation. Depending on how kind your examiner is, you might get 1 mark, but I don't think so. Personally, I wouldn't give a mark there. Let's look at the second part, part B. Describe. Now, here we're describing, and here's the green section, methods. We want to describe methods. So we want to identify methods, and then we want to clarify the methods that we've identified to show why we've chosen that answer. We need to show knowledge. Describe methods that software producers use to prevent software copyright being broken. So how do software producers prevent their copyright being broken? So one method I've got here is serial numbers are often used with software. Okay, I've identified it. When the user installs the software, they are required to enter a valid serial number, which they have acquired from the legal owner of the copyright, usually a company. So when you buy a piece of software, you're given a valid serial number, and you have to enter that serial number when you're installing your software. Okay. Another method is the license agreement which people must accept when installing software or downloading content. The license agreement describes how the user is able to use the content legally. If the user breaks the license agreement, then they can be prosecuted. So I've given you methods and I've also explained them. 2 methods, explanation for each, 4 marks. Don't know if I've got a bad one. Yep, I do. They tell you a license key so that you can use their software. Again, too vague, even for that 1 mark. Even to get that 1 mark, you haven't really explained anything. Again, if the examiner is being very generous, the fact that you put a license key, you've identified something, you might get a mark for that. C, emails are used by people to communicate with each other. Copyright and using acceptable language in the email are 2 of the constraints that affect the use of email. Okay, so again, describe. How many times is describe? So we want to describe 4 other constraints. So we want to identify 4 constraints and we need to elaborate on them to say why we've chosen. We need to show knowledge on each one of these that may affect the use of email. So 1, appropriate netiquette must be used. Always being polite and respectful. Do not write angry emails. Do not use capital letters as this represents shouting. Now, I've probably given more reasons here for that one, but doesn't matter. It's clear, providing I'm not repeating myself in the other 3. If I can't think of another 3, or if I only got 3 and I can't think of 4, I can break this up a little bit, probably. Do not use email for advertising by sending emails to a large number of recipients so as to advertise a product or service. This is called spamming. So spamming, I could have started with spamming and explained what that was. I went the other route. Work or company email accounts may have their own internal rules and regulations on how you can use email. For example, only sending emails during work hours, or only sending emails within the company, or only attaching files which are under 1 MB. So they might have their own internal rules, and that could be a constraint on using email. Some countries or companies monitor keywords included in emails. Using any of the keywords could result in your email being blocked or you getting into trouble. So, especially if you're in the US, if you use the B word like bomb or something like that, or the word terrorist or attack or something, these keywords trigger rules and could land you into trouble. Okay, so these are 4. I think I've given a bad one as well. Here we go. So using acceptable language in the email. What do we mean by acceptable? Companies may not allow you to send emails outside work hours. Okay, that's okay. Companies may have a limit on how many emails you can send. Companies may not allow you to add attachments. These 3, 2, 3, and 4, these are the same thing. we're talking about the company rules. Now we can sit down and list 500 different company rules. At the end of the day, this is still one constraint. These are internal regulations of a company. And this first one here is actually given again in the question. So it says acceptable using acceptable language. So it's not going to get a mark because they've already given you that one. And you probably get 1 mark for these 3 here together because it comes under company rules. Okay, let's go to this. I think it's the last one of this question. Yep. Okay, so describe. Again, describe. Can you see how many times describe comes up? Now, if it comes up with describe and give a conclusion, then that's usually, well, I'll talk about that a bit later. So describe 2 rules of these of the use of acceptable language in emails. So again, here we want to describe, and we want to describe rules of the acceptable language in email. So 1, I've got do not use swear words and always be polite. Never answer an email in anger or retaliation so as to avoid giving strong language. Okay, so that's the 1 rule. Be polite, do not use swear words or disrespectful words. Respect other people's privacy. Do not share other people's personal information unless you have their written consent to do so. So, I mean, we always know the rule, we don't give our personal information, but at the same time, we need to respect other people's personal information. So we don't add other people's personal information in electronic communication unless we're required to do so for whatever reason we've gained permission. And I always say written permission from the person whose details you're going to share. I don't think I've given a bad answer for that because there really isn't one. Okay, so here we go to number 14. This is second from the last question. The manager of a medical center keeps the doctor's stock records in the database. The stock for any item is not allowed to fall below 15 items. Okay, so that's a limit. And the manager keeps a maximum of 100 items in stock. The table shows examples of the stock. So here you would have to take some time to analyze and look at this data and really understand what this is. You've got name of item, serial number, number in stock, name of supplier, shelf number. Relate this data in this table to the description of the question at the top here. Okay. Now, as data is entered, it needs to be verified and validated. Okay, so we're looking at verified and validated. Remember, verification is carried out by humans. Validation is carried out by rules in the system. Explain why verification is carried out. Why do we carry out verification? Well, remember, verification is all about you double checking that the material that you're entering into the database, so the data you're entering into the database is correct. So you've probably got a piece of paper, you've probably got some other source for your data, and you're taking that data and putting it into your own database. So why do we need verification? Well, verification is used so as to check that the data entered is correct and it matches the original document from where the data is entered from. That's what we want. The bad answer to that would be one method of verification can be one person checking what someone else is entering. This isn't answering the question. This is not why verification is carried out. This is what is verification. So that gets 0 marks. Write down the field name from the table that would be the most appropriate for each of these validation checks. Now, this is validation. Validation is carried out by computer. So we can have things like a range check, we can have a format check, we can have the different types of check. So here we've got a check digit. So we would apply a check digit check on the serial number because we do this often with serial numbers. Serial numbers are quite long, and to make sure that the serial number is correct and of correct format, we have a procedure where a number is generated from the rest of the numbers, and that's your check digit. A length check. So a length check here, I will probably go for shelf number because all of these have got 4 numbers. And that's the only one, whereas the number in stock could vary and the serial number could vary. And remember here, it does actually say each answer must be different. Okay, so we have to make sure each answer is different. And then the type check. So for here, type check, I will put, let's say, number in stock because I will make sure it is a number format and we don't put a, let's say, an O instead of 0. Okay. You could also put a type check for the serial number, maybe, because that's also, but we need to make sure all of these are different. So we've used serial number, we can't use it again. We could use it for name of item because that's always text, and name of supplier also because that's always text. Name the most appropriate field from the table that could be used as a primary key field in the database. There's no point discussing it. I mean, serial number, and that's its purpose. It is, in fact, always serial number is a primary key because they are unique. Unless you've got some unique circumstances, we won't go into that. But in this case, what's going to be different every single time is going to be the serial number. Okay, now notice also when I've written these, I've actually written them exactly as the field names are. So the first one is capital, using underscore for the spaces and using small letters for the rest. And that's how I've written my answers as well. Not a requirement, but it does actually show good practice because serial underscore number is not really serial space number. This is the field name and you want to identify the field names. So you want to get into the habit of writing things exactly as they're seen. Okay, I think it's the last question. Yay, there we go. Okay, a customer is booking a seat on a theatre's online booking system. The customer reserves seats using the theatre's website and a debit card. The website displays the seats that are available and the database stores the customer details, the payment details, and the seat details. All right. So when the customer enters the debit card details for a seat, the theatre's computer communicates with the bank's computer. So here we just need to get a good understanding of the scenario. Describe. Here we go again. What are we doing? We're describing the checks. We want to find the different checks that are going to be used. Now, that the bank's computer will make on the customer's bank account. So the first one I've got here is the card reported stolen? That's the first check, is if the card's been reported stolen, they will put a suck in the card. Is the card number valid? So the number on the card, it will check it. Does the account have sufficient funds for the transaction? So if they want to book the tickets and it costs $300, let's say, or €300, it's first going to check before it can actually book anything and make sure they've actually got those funds. It won't check how much they have in their account. It will check if the amount of money or the funds which it requires are available. Okay, so it doesn't actually check the personal information and say how much money does the person have. Does the security CVV code entered match what is stored on the bank's system? So the CVV code is actually a number on the back of a credit card, and you have to enter it whenever you're going to make a payment. And if you enter that number, it has to be the same number which is on record in the bank system. Okay, so describe the processing. What is the processing now? The processing is the mechanics or the things that happen. Okay, so here it says describe the processing carried out by the theatre's computer when making a booking. So what does the theatre's computer do or have to do, the different things it has to do when a booking is made or when it's going to make a booking? So here's a model answer for you. Based on the customer's request to book a number of seats for an event at the theatre on a specific date. So here I've put in that the customer is going to look for a particular event on a particular date and wants a specific number of seats. The theatre's computer will first use the event reference number to find the event and make sure the number of seats requested are available. So every event will have, since it's a database, it's always going to be a database, it's going to have some kind of unique number, primary key, and this probably will be the event ID. And that event ID will link to the event, the number of seats, the date and the time and everything. If there is availability, the seats are flagged so that they are temporarily unavailable for anyone else to avoid double booking. Now, what does this mean? So as soon as you're trying to do the booking, before you've made the payment, you want 3 seats. They actually flag those seats straight away. So if somebody else is trying to book those seats as well, you can't get double booking. So temporarily, those, let's say you're booking 3 seats, those 3 seats aren't available for anyone else right now, but there will be if you don't complete the transaction. The total number of seats available for the event is reduced by the number of seats the customer has booked. So if it's 3, that's going to take away 3, make the number of available seats less by 3. Once the payment for the seats is approved, the seats are locked and marked as booked. And that's now, once they've paid, those seats cannot be unbooked. Now, if they don't complete that transaction, essentially, those 3 seats will then be made available again. And you could write that in your answer. Electronic tickets are then produced and emailed to the customer for printing. So since this is an online system, we said it's online because it's up here, online booking system. To get their tickets, they're going to have to be sent to them somehow. They're not going to take, their laptop or whatever. You might have an electronic ticket, which is, again, you can write this down. It could be a QR code or a barcode or something which they can scan or show. But my answer says that they're going to receive their electronic ticket, which they can print, and verification of the booking and the receipt of payment is sent to the customer. So they need to also get some kind of receipt. Some people might want to claim the amount that they spent for this event. It might be a company event that they're taking their clients out and they want to claim that money back. So they have to give the receipt. So they should be sent the receipt as well, together with the verification of that event. Okay, that is that paper. Now, the one thing I haven't really found in this paper was give a conclusion, describe and give a conclusion. But if it says, if you have a question where you have to say, find the advantages and disadvantages or of using, let's say, different devices for a particular scenario and give a reasoned conclusion, then you would go into your compare and contrast. Okay, so when you've got compare and contrast, you will compare the different items, find the things, find out which items are best. For example, in this example here, I'm just going to delete all these highlightings from here. So this example here where I've been talking about storage devices, hard disk drives, CDs, and USBs, and let's say it said compare and contrast and give your conclusion as to which is better for a student to store their work, their school work, so that they can take it from school to home. Now, we don't have the option of cloud, so I would give these compare and contrast methods. Oh, this one's better, this one, compared to the other one, as we've seen this example. But then I would conclude, based on the above, I would suggest the memory stick being the USB memory stick being the better option for a student because it's small, it's portable, you can read and write on it. You don't need vast amounts of storage for schoolwork, and the memory stick should only be used to transfer files from school to their home computer. So it's not going to be a place of permanent storage. So my conclusion will be the best option will be a USB memory stick. Wow, that is a long tutorial. I wanted to make this tutorial as complete as possible for you. I think I've covered everything that you need to know about all of these different explanations. If you are taking the exam, good luck. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you've learned anything new, if you found this tutorial useful, and I will see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.